What if the most powerful forces guiding your decisions, your dreams, your fears, were completely invisible to you? Today, we embark on a journey through the mysterious corridors of the unconscious mind, not just as an idea, but as a revolution in how we understand ourselves. And it all begins with a young Swiss psychiatrist, Carl Gustav Jung, and a life-changing break from the man he once called a mentor. Stay with us until the end, because what you'll learn might just reshape how you view your own mind. Segment 1: The Making of a Mind. Carl Jung was born in 1875 in Keswil, a quiet village on Lake Constance in Switzerland. He was a solitary child, introspective, and often found solace in books, dreams, and imagination. His father, a pastor, struggled with doubt about his religious beliefs. His mother, reportedly prone to mysterious trances and emotional shifts, left Jung with a sense that something far deeper operated beneath the surface of consciousness. As Jung matured, he didn't just see the world, he felt it in layers. When he began his medical studies at the University of Basel, psychiatry was still in its infancy. The brain was a mystery. Mental illness? Often misunderstood as weakness or moral failing. But Jung was fascinated by what couldn't be explained: the irrational, the symbolic, the spiritual undercurrents of human life. Example: imagine you're walking down a street and suddenly feel overwhelmed with dread. There's no logical reason. Nothing dangerous around. Yet something inside you reacts as if you're under threat. Jung would say, that's your unconscious speaking, a force deeper than logic, rooted in memory, emotion, maybe even collective history. Jung's medical career led him to the Bergholzli Psychiatric Hospital in Zurich, one of the most advanced institutions of the time. There, under the guidance of Eugen Bleuler, Jung began working with schizophrenic patients and experimenting with word association tests. A breakthrough that would bring him international recognition. Segment 2: The Freud Encounter. In 1906, Jung sent a copy of his word association studies to a man he greatly admired, Sigmund Freud. Freud, then already gaining fame in Vienna for his revolutionary ideas about the unconscious and dreams, responded with excitement. The two began a correspondence that quickly turned into a deep intellectual friendship. When they met for the first time, they reportedly spoke for over 13 hours straight. Freud saw Jung as his heir, the crown prince of psychoanalysis. Young, brilliant, and not Jewish, Jung's inclusion could make Freud's movement more palatable in a Europe simmering with anti-Semitism. But more than that, Jung believed in the unconscious, a realm Freud had helped uncover through dream interpretation and free association. But there was one big problem. For Freud, the unconscious was mostly a cauldron of repressed sexuality and childhood trauma. For Jung, it was something much more vast and mysterious. And that difference would eventually shatter their friendship. Segment 3: The Crack in the Foundation. Jung's growing discomfort with Freud's strict focus on sexuality wasn't just intellectual, it was personal. Jung believed that reducing all psychic conflict to sexual repression was, in his words, too narrow. He began to sense there were deeper symbolic forces at play, ones that connected mythology, religion, and dreams in a way Freud's theories couldn't explain. Consider this: why do people across cultures dream of falling, flying, or facing shadowy figures? Why do certain symbols, snakes, the sun, the mother, appear again and again in stories from vastly different civilizations? Freud would say these were personal symbols tied to individual childhood experiences. Jung started to believe otherwise. He proposed the idea of the collective unconscious. A shared reservoir of archetypes and symbolic patterns inherited across generations. And that idea was heresy in Freud's circle. Example: let's take the hero's journey, a pattern you'll find in everything from Star Wars to ancient Egyptian myths. Jung argued this wasn't just coincidence or cultural borrowing. He saw it as a psychological blueprint, an unconscious map embedded in the human mind. The split was coming. And Jung felt it. Segment 4: The Break. By 1912, Jung and Freud's relationship had deteriorated. The final straw came with Jung's publication of Psychology of the Unconscious, a work that directly challenged Freud's views and laid the foundation for Jung's own psychological framework. Freud accused Jung of betrayal. Jung accused Freud of dogmatism. The break wasn't just professional. It was existential. Jung spiraled into a deep psychological crisis, sometimes described as a creative illness. He began experiencing vivid dreams, visions, and even what some today might call hallucinations. But instead of running from these experiences, Jung turned toward them. He began documenting them in what would later be known as the Red Book, a stunning, deeply personal manuscript filled with drawings, dialogues with inner figures, and mythic narratives. Jung wasn't losing his mind. He was diving into it. And this, perhaps more than anything else, is where his true discovery began. Segment 5: A New Kind of Inner World. Jung's descent into the unconscious wasn't a retreat, it was a confrontation. He came to see the psyche as a vast, dynamic system, not just a container of repressed memories, but a living landscape with its own structure, characters, and goals. He met what he would call the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny or repress. He spoke with inner figures he called Anima and Animus, representations of feminine and masculine qualities within. He encountered what he called the self, a symbol of wholeness and integration. These weren't just metaphors. For Jung, they were real psychic forces, autonomous components of the unconscious that guided, challenged, and sometimes overwhelmed the conscious ego. Example: have you ever sabotaged yourself in a moment of success? Said something in a relationship that you immediately regretted? That might not be just a mistake. Jung would suggest it's your shadow making itself known, reminding you that you can't simply ignore or repress what's inside. Instead of fighting these inner figures, Jung believed we must dialogue with them, a process he called active imagination. It was part dreamwork, part meditation, part creative expression, and it allowed people to engage with the unconscious consciously. This wasn't about pathology. It was about integration. By the 1920s, Jung had emerged from his psychological crisis with a completely new model of the mind. His ideas would go on to shape modern therapy, art, literature, and even marketing. Terms like introvert and extrovert come from Jung. So do ideas behind the Myers-Briggs personality test. But perhaps more importantly, Jung gave people a language for the unseen, a way to speak about the invisible currents shaping their lives. He encouraged us to stop fearing our dreams and begin understanding them. To stop chasing perfection and begin embracing wholeness. To look at life not as a puzzle to be solved, but a journey toward integration. And this is just the beginning. In the next episode, we'll dive deeper into Jung's concept of archetypes, what they are, how they work, and how they still show up in your favorite movies, your relationships, even your spiritual life. So if you've ever felt like something within you is calling, like there's a deeper story unfolding beneath your everyday routine, you'll want to stay tuned. Carl Jung didn't just map the unconscious, he lived it. And by following his path, we might begin to understand our own. If this journey into the unconscious has sparked your curiosity, consider subscribing. It helps support the channel and ensures you don't miss the next step in this unfolding story. And remember, sometimes, the most powerful discoveries lie just beneath the surface. Who looks outside, dreams, who looks inside, awakes. Carl Jung. Part 2, The Architecture of the Unconscious, Archetypes and the Collective Mind. Across the world, across history, humans have told the same stories of heroes and villains, lovers and mentors, deaths and rebirths. Different cultures. Different languages. Same patterns. What if that's not a coincidence? What if your personal struggles are echoing something ancient, something universal? In this episode, we step deeper into Jung's world and explore his most influential and misunderstood idea, archetypes. Stay with us, because by the end, you may start seeing these patterns everywhere. Even within yourself. Segment 1, What is an archetype? Imagine you're watching a movie. The hero is reluctant. He receives a call, maybe from a mentor, maybe from tragedy. He leaves home, faces trials, encounters a wise guide, maybe even a trickster. Eventually, he returns, transformed. Sound familiar? You've seen it in The Matrix, Harry Potter, Moana, Black Panther, Star Wars. These are not just formulas. They're echoes of archetypes. For Jung, archetypes are primordial images embedded deep in the human psyche. They're not taught. They're inherited. Part of what he called the collective unconscious, the shared layer of the mind that transcends culture, geography, and even time. They're not fixed characters. They're psychic blueprints, recurring patterns of behavior, emotion, and story. Example: the mother archetype isn't just your biological mom. It appears in fairy godmothers, nature goddesses, caregivers, even AI systems designed to nurture. It can be nurturing or devouring, kind or controlling. It's the pattern that matters, not the person. Segment 2: The Collective Unconscious. Let's be clear, Jung wasn't saying we all share the same thoughts. That's not how the collective unconscious works. Think of it like anatomy. We all have different faces, but the same basic structure: eyes, nose, mouth. Archetypes are like psychological bones, deep structures that shape the way we perceive, react, and dream. Jung believed that just as we inherit instinctual behaviors, like a bird building a nest, we also inherit psychic instincts, patterns of fear, love, transformation, conflict. So when a child fears the dark, or a person dreams of flying, these aren't just random images. They're doors into archetypal realms. Example: take the nightmare of being chased. It's one of the most universal dreams. Why? Because the archetype of the shadow, the repressed, denied part of ourselves, often appears as a pursuer. Something dark, unknown, threatening, but deeply familiar. Segment 3: The Main Archetypes. So what are these archetypes? Jung didn't give us a fixed list, but he highlighted several recurring figures. The self, the archetype of wholeness, your integrated totality. The shadow, your dark side, the rejected or denied parts of you. The anima/animus, your inner feminine, if male, or inner masculine, if female. The persona, the social mask you wear in public. The hero, the part of you that fights for growth, purpose, or truth. The wise old man/woman, your internal guide or higher insight. The trickster, the rule breaker, the chaos agent, the disruptor. These show up in dreams, stories, and even in your personal life roles. Example: have you ever tried to act a certain way at work, confident, polished, agreeable, only to feel drained or fake? That's your persona at work. A mask. Useful, even necessary. But Jung warned, if you mistake the persona for your true self, you risk becoming hollow. Living for appearances instead of authenticity. Segment 4: Archetypes in Real Life. Archetypes aren't confined to myths or dreams. They show up every day. That mentor who pushes you to grow? That's the wise old man archetype. The ex who always seemed to evoke both fascination and frustration? Possibly an Anima or Animus projection. That moment you finally stood up for yourself after years of silence? That's your hero breaking through. But archetypes aren't always friendly. The shadow, in particular, is often difficult to face. It contains all the traits we suppress: aggression, envy, shame, guilt. But ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. It shows up in projections, when we blame others for traits we secretly carry ourselves. Example: if you constantly accuse others of being arrogant, Jung would suggest asking, where in me does arrogance live? That's the shadow knocking. And integration begins when we stop pretending we are only light. Segment 5: Active Imagination, Meeting the Archetypes. Jung didn't just theorize about archetypes, he spoke to them. Using a technique called active imagination, Jung engaged in dialogues with inner figures. He would meditate on a dream image or inner figure, then write conversations or draw them in vivid detail. It wasn't psychosis. It was psychological exploration. He once described speaking with a figure named Philemon, who became a sort of inner guide. In the Red Book, Jung depicts Philemon as a wise, bearded man with wings, part prophet, part teacher. These weren't fantasies. Jung believed these figures held real wisdom. They were autonomous parts of the psyche, not under the control of the ego, but essential to wholeness. Modern analogy. Today, we might call this part's work like an internal family systems therapy, where people speak to their inner critic, wounded child, or protective parts. Jung was doing this decades before it became mainstream. Segment 6. Archetypes in Culture and Creativity. Writers, filmmakers, artists, whether they know it or not, are channeling archetypes. George Lucas famously consulted with mythologist Joseph Campbell, who built much of his hero's journey theory on Jungian archetypes. From Frodo to Katniss, these characters are mirrors of our inner journeys. Marketing experts use archetypes to build brands. Nike channels the hero. Apple, the rebel. Dove, the caregiver. These aren't just labels, they evoke deep psychological resonance. And it's not manipulation. It works because these patterns are hardwired into us. Personal example. When someone starts a new business and feels the terror of leaving a stable job, they're stepping into the hero's journey. When a parent learns to let go as their child grows up, they're encountering the wise guide, and also wrestling with the shadow of fear and control. Jung's brilliance was in giving us a language to talk about all of this without pathologizing it. Segment 7. Why it matters. So why should you care about archetypes? Because they're already shaping your life. Your relationships. Your choices. Your struggles. When you become conscious of them, you stop being a passive actor in a script you didn't write. You start co-authoring your story. You begin asking, what archetype am I living right now? What archetype am I rejecting? What is life asking me to become? This awareness can be transformative. Real-life example. A man in midlife might begin to feel his corporate achievements are hollow. He dreams of a crumbling house or an old man in the forest. Therapy reveals he's transitioning from the hero archetype to the wise man, not chasing conquest, but meaning. That shift, if embraced, leads to peace. If denied, to crisis. Carl Jung taught us that we are not blank slates. We are mythic beings, carrying ancient patterns in our modern lives. You don't need to find your story, you're already living one. The question is, are you aware of it? In our next episode, we'll explore the shadow more deeply, how it forms, how it shows up in relationships and politics, and how confronting it can unleash enormous personal power. If this exploration of archetypes stirred something in you, if you saw a part of yourself reflected in these patterns, consider subscribing. Not for numbers, but for the unfolding journey. We'll be diving into the depths Jung explored, and you're invited. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Part 3, The Shadow, Facing the Dark Within. Why do we judge others so harshly? Why do we say, I don't know what came over me, after lashing out or making a terrible decision? What if the real answer lies in a part of ourselves we spend our whole lives avoiding? This episode explores what Carl Jung called the shadow, the hidden side of your personality, the traits you deny, the emotions you repress, and the dark truths you refuse to see. Stay with us, because by the end of this episode, you'll understand why confronting your shadow may be the most powerful and dangerous thing you can ever do. Segment 1. What is the shadow? Jung defined the shadow as everything in us that is unconscious, repressed, denied, or ignored. It includes not just our fears and insecurities, but also our desires, impulses, and even talents that don't fit with our self-image. It's not just the bad stuff. It's anything we push away in order to be who we think we should be. As Jung wrote, the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. No one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. Example. The employee who always seems cheerful but secretly resents their co-workers. The activist who fights for justice but privately bullies anyone who disagrees. The romantic partner who loves deeply but secretly manipulates with guilt. All are examples of people living in denial of their shadow. Segment 2, How the Shadow Forms. The shadow begins in childhood. As we grow up, we learn what behaviors are acceptable. Be polite. Don't cry. Boys don't do that. Good girls don't act that way. To fit in, we push away the parts of us that others reject. These traits don't disappear. They just sink into the unconscious. Imagine your psyche as a house. You show guests the clean, decorated living room, your persona. But everything messy, wild, shameful? That gets shoved into the basement, your shadow. Eventually, the basement gets crowded. And when it overflows, it bursts through the floor in the form of projections, outbursts, sabotage, or worse. Real-life example. A high-powered executive is praised for being composed and rational. But under pressure, they explode at a waiter over a tiny mistake. They say, "I don't know what came over me." Jung would say, "It wasn't random. It was a shadow eruption." Segment 3, Projection, Seeing the Shadow in Others. One of the most common ways we encounter the shadow is through projection. We deny a quality in ourselves, then project it onto others. You might think, "She's so arrogant," when you're hiding your own desire to be assertive. "He's such a people pleaser," when you're afraid of how much you crave approval. They're evil, when you're refusing to look at the potential for harm within yourself. Jung believed that what irritates us in others often reveals what we're blind to in ourselves. This is one of the shadow's tricks. It hides behind judgment. Exercise, for viewers to consider silently. Think of someone who really triggers you. What is it about them that you can't stand? Now ask, when have I acted like that? Where in my life am I afraid of becoming that? The answer may be uncomfortable. That's the point. Segment 4, The Shadow in Culture and Politics. The shadow isn't just personal. It's cultural. Societies have collective shadows, traits, or histories they suppress. In politics, shadow projection can be catastrophic. Entire groups are demonized, dehumanized, and blamed for a society's ills. History shows this repeatedly in genocides, witch hunts, ideological purges. People become possessed by collective shadow projections. And as Jung warned, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. Even movements based on justice or morality can fall prey to the shadow if they become rigid, self-righteous, or blind to their own flaws. Example. A movement that begins by calling out injustice can descend into cancel culture if it refuses any room for forgiveness or complexity. It becomes a morality play with heroes and villains rather than a dialogue between whole, flawed human beings. Jung's insight: when we refuse to acknowledge our own darkness, we become dangerous in the name of the good. Segment 5, Meeting the Shadow. So how do we face the shadow? Not by destroying it, but by integrating it. Jung didn't believe we could eliminate the shadow. Instead, we must become conscious of it. We must learn to hold tension, to admit, "I am capable of love and cruelty, compassion and selfishness, wisdom and ignorance." This is not easy work. It requires humility, honesty, and courage. Methods to engage the shadow. Dream analysis. Shadows often appear in dreams as monsters, strangers, or chaotic environments. Keep a journal. Look for patterns. Active imagination. Speak to your inner critic. Draw the frightening figure. Ask what it wants. Therapy. A trained analyst can help you spot projections, triggers, and inner conflicts. Self-reflection. Ask, what am I hiding, even from myself? When do I overreact? Who do I judge most? Personal example. A woman in therapy realizes she's spent years being nice, avoiding conflict, and pleasing others. But inside, she's angry, exhausted, and full of resentment. As she begins to embrace her assertiveness and anger, previously part of her shadow, she becomes more whole. Less nice. More real. Segment 6, The Shadow's Gift. Here's the secret: the shadow is not just a monster. It's a source of enormous power. In myths, the hero must often enter a cave, a forest, or the underworld, facing beasts, dragons, or inner demons. This descent isn't punishment. It's a rite of passage. Only by confronting the dark can the hero grow. Jung believed that inside the shadow lives untapped energy, creativity, and potential. Anger, if understood, becomes clarity and boundaries. Envy becomes motivation. Shame becomes the root of empathy. The shadow guards our gold. But we must earn it. Segment 7, Why Integration Matters. When you begin to integrate your shadow, something shifts. You stop reacting so intensely to others. You become more honest in relationships. You begin to live with a kind of groundedness, not because you're perfect, but because you're whole. You can say, I was wrong. I'm afraid. I want more than I'm admitting. There's a part of me I've denied for years. This is the essence of individuation, the lifelong process Jung described as becoming your true self, beyond masks and roles. It begins by walking into the dark. Carl Jung wasn't just a scientist. He was a soul mapper. And in the shadow, he saw not a place of shame, but a path to power. So ask yourself, what part of me have I buried? What have I judged in others that I must reclaim in myself? And most of all, what gold might I find in the darkness? In the next episode, we'll explore the process of individuation, how Jung believed we move from fragmentation to wholeness, and why midlife often awakens a longing for something deeper. If this episode spoke to something unspoken within you, consider subscribing. The journey inward is just beginning. You are not what has happened to you. You are what you choose to become. Carl Jung. Part 4, Individuation, the Journey to the True Self. Why do people in midlife suddenly leave high-paying jobs, seek therapy, or move to a monastery? Why do some reach the peak of external success, only to feel empty inside? Carl Jung believed this wasn't failure. It was an invitation. An invitation to become who you really are, not who you were told to be. In this episode, we explore what Jung called the individuation process, the central journey of psychological and spiritual development. If you've ever wondered why your external achievements don't bring inner peace, you'll want to stay with us. This is where things get personal. Segment 1, What is individuation? Individuation is not self-improvement. It's not about fixing yourself. Jung defined it as the process of becoming an individual, a unique, integrated whole, distinct from the collective roles, expectations, and masks we adopt. It's a reconciliation of opposites. Conscious and unconscious. Light and shadow. Masculine and feminine. Persona and true self. Individuation is a lifelong unfolding of your authentic nature, shaped not by conformity, but by inner necessity. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real. Segment 2, the first half of life, building the ego. Jung divided life into two major phases. The first half is about ego formation. We establish our identity, career, relationships, social roles. We develop our persona, the mask we show to the world. This phase is important. The ego isn't bad. It gives us structure. We need to know how to function, relate, and belong. But around midlife, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, something begins to shift. Success loses its shine. Old goals feel hollow. Dreams become more vivid. A question arises. Is this really who I am? This marks the threshold of individuation. Real-life example. A lawyer in her 40s feels burned out. She's respected, well-paid, and admired. But she starts having dreams of drowning. She begins painting again, something she loved as a child. She starts therapy. Over time, she realizes she became a lawyer to please her father. Now, she begins to explore what she truly wants. Segment 3, The Descent, Midlife and the Call of the Self. Individuation often begins with a crisis, an illness, divorce, job loss, or depression. Jung didn't see these as breakdowns. He saw them as breakthroughs. In myths, the hero must leave the village, descend into the underworld, face trials, and return transformed. This descent mirrors the individuation journey. It's not glamorous. It involves doubt, grief, disorientation. But it's necessary. To find the self, we must confront everything we've denied, the shadow, unlived dreams, suppressed emotion. In each of us, there is another whom we do not know. Jung. Example. A man in his 50s starts having anxiety and dreams of a child crying. Through therapy, he realizes he abandoned his playful, vulnerable side in childhood. Individuation for him means reconnecting with joy, not just discipline. Segment 4: Symbols, Dreams, and the Language of the Self. The self, the center of the psyche, doesn't speak in words. It speaks in symbols. Dreams are a direct path to this inner language. In dreams, the self often appears as a wise figure, a sage, a deity, a parent. A mandala, a circular symbol representing wholeness. An animal, child, or unknown other. Jung called the dream the royal road to the unconscious. He would ask, what part of you does this figure represent? What is the dream trying to balance in your life? Example. A woman dreams she's carrying a wounded wolf. Through analysis, she realizes the wolf represents her instinctual, emotional side long rejected in her perfectionist personality. Integrating the wolf means learning to feel again, not just perform. Segment 5: The Role of the Anima and Animus. A key part of individuation is integrating the anima and animus, the inner feminine in men, and the inner masculine in women. These are not about gender. They are psychological polarities. For men, the anima may appear as moods, feelings, or symbolic women in dreams, representing creativity, intuition, and relational depth. For women, the animus may appear as thoughts, opinions, or symbolic men representing structure, assertion, and inner authority. When unintegrated, these figures can control us from the shadows. Example. A man fixates on a romantic partner who feels magical, mysterious, even unreal. Jung would say he's projecting his anima onto her, not seeing her, but his own unconscious longing for connection and meaning. Integrating the anima means turning inward, listening to emotion, expressing vulnerability, and building real relationships. Segment 6: The Individuated Life, Wholeness over Perfection. So what does an individuated life look like? Not fame, fortune, or even constant happiness. It looks like authenticity. A deep sense of inner alignment. You know your strengths and your flaws. You've faced your darkness. You live from your own values. You don't chase status. You pursue meaning. You may look the same on the outside, but inside, everything has changed. Example. A retired teacher becomes a community storyteller. Not because she should, but because she feels called. Her work is quiet, but it nourishes her soul. She is no longer performing, she is being. That's individuation, not noise, but resonance. Segment 7: The Spiritual Dimension. For Jung, individuation was deeply spiritual, not in a religious sense, but in a symbolic one. He saw the psyche as sacred. The self, for Jung, resembled the God within. As he wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." He drew from alchemy, mythology, and Eastern traditions to understand the psyche's transformation. He believed that through dreams, synchronicities, and inner work, we could reconnect with a greater intelligence, something beyond the ego. Individuation, then, is not just psychological. It's soul work. It asks, what is life asking of me? Not what do I want, but who am I meant to become? The world tells you who to be. Your true self waits patiently beneath it all. Carl Jung didn't offer easy answers. But he offered a path. A map. A language for the soul. If you felt that quiet whisper that there's more to you than what others see, then you're already on the path of individuation. In our next episode, we'll explore how Jung's personal mystical experiences, especially those chronicled in the Red Book, shaped his most daring insights, and why he almost lost everything to follow his truth. If this journey speaks to you, consider subscribing. We're not chasing algorithms here. We're mapping a path into the unconscious and back out again. Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Carl Jung.